This is Jordan Bradford here with Jeff Beck, and you're listening to Just Ballin' with JB, brought to you by D. Oliver Design. For all your commercial graphic design needs, visit dolliverdesign.com. All right, folks, we are back, and we got lots of good stuff to talk about here. Lots of stuff going on. Probably going to kick it off with a little March Madness. Jeff, we got the first round, or first weekend, I should say, first two rounds of March Madness under our belt, and lots of good games. But I guess the big question I kind of want to throw out there is just like, is there anything from the first weekend that you want to overreact to, or think that, I have an overreaction to the weekend and it's this? What stuck out to you this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be someone who doesn't overreact to stuff. I mean, not that I do that perfectly, but I try not to. So if I'm going to be the opposite and say I will overreact and say something that could be stupid, but hopefully not, I would say it's got to be Duke. I mean, they obviously were, are a number one seed coming in. They got, the best player probably in the country on their team. So there was obviously some pretty high expectations, I think, coming in for them. But we've seen plenty of very highly taught teams that have not panned out, right? I mean, Duke has had plenty, whether it's Zion and RJ Barrett, Kentucky teams that had some of that incredible talent. They don't always make it happen. So I think if you're realistically looking at it, you'd say, yeah, still a lot to prove, a lot to show. But if I'm going to overreact, I would say, I mean, they look flatly like the best team. They've shown on the court. They've proven it, time and time again. And I would just say, yeah, if I'm overreacting, they're, a lock to win the tournament. I take them as, against the field at this point. Just a few numbers that stood out to me. I saw something about 30-point victories they had, and this last game wasn't quite there. But they have 10 30-point wins this year. The team that has the most was Kansas in 07-08. They had 11. And guess who won the championship that year?
I think that was the Kansas year. Was that Mario Chalmers hitting the big one against Derrick Rose?
I was going to say Memphis. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not always everything follows suit, but I mean, that was, that's the only team that's had more. And then they come in, beat Baylor by 23 points yesterday. Clearly, the best win yesterday, just overall not that how many points you win by is always an enormous indicator, but they won by 23. McNeese only lost by 14 to Purdue. That was the next closest loss. So you start looking at that. I think they're just showing it. They got huge size. They got Cooper Flagg. Yeah, I think they're overreaction. They're a lock to win the tournament.
Yeah, I actually thought about that same one. I'm glad I didn't pick the same thing to say. Otherwise, I'd be just repeating. But I guess I have kind of 1.5 overreactions, because the half kind of I'll attach to that Duke take. And I kind of mentioned it to you in our little pre-show we did yesterday. But I actually think that right now I would bet on Duke to win every game the rest of the way by double digits. I think UConn did it a couple years ago. It was either last year or the year before, on their back-to-back champs that they had the last 2 years. One of those years, I think they won every game in the tournament by double digits. I think Duke's team is trending in that direction. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but I totally agree with you. I'd take Duke versus the field. They have the best player and they have the best team. I mean, you see it even with Cooper Flagg not playing when he's not on the floor. It's not like they suddenly stop moving the ball, or they can't score, or they can't defend. You see that with other teams where their star goes out and all of a sudden it's just like they're treading water, trying to stay afloat in the game. Duke just doesn't seem to have that problem because they're a well-coached team, a lot of talent, top to bottom there.
I think that's what makes him so good, is even though he is a superstar and puts up superstar numbers, he really doesn't play like a superstar would. He is a very team-oriented, as a guy, it's LeBron James-esque in the sense that it's not just, I have to score every single time. That's something that makes me a star. Yeah, he just plays the game and it happens. But that way, when he goes out too, other people just fill in and do the stuff, because that's just kind of how his game naturally goes.
Yeah, I mean, he's in that modern mold of that point forward, that he's a big, but you see him bring the ball up the court a lot. And I know in the NBA that's a lot lot more common. That happens more. Like in college basketball, there's not a lot of dudes who are 6'9", 6'10", who are going to dribble the ball up the court with frequency and initiate the offense. Like it just doesn't happen as much. And I think that just goes to show his overall skill set and what he provides to that team is a lot more than just give me the ball, I'm going to go ISO, or I'm just going to dominate you because I'm 7'4", Zach Edey, So Flagg actually has like a lot of skill, does a lot of things on the court that just adds to winning basketball. But the real overreaction I wanted to put out there, and I haven't really heard a lot of this. I've heard a little chatter about this kind of leading into the weekend, but I think there's a small chance that the mid-majors are done. And if you look at this year specifically, and also look at college football too, and just kind of what is happening there with the NIL and the transfer portal. But if you look at specifically this tournament, this is the first year, I think, in like 30 years I saw that there have been only 4 conferences represented in the Sweet 16. And one of those conferences, the ACC, has 1 team. Now, they have the best team, but you have, 15 teams, 3 conferences, the SEC, Big 12, Big 10, and the ACC. So you have no mid-major conferences represented. And not only was that a little bit of kind of like an outlier to me from a statistical standpoint, you just look at the games across the board. None of the mid-majors really performed as well as I think they typically do. There weren't as many upsets. I think they said it was like the first time in 20 years that like a 13 seed or worse had not advanced past the first round. So I think with NIL, with the transfer portal the way it is, I think what you're seeing is these guys go to a McNeese, right? And they play pretty well. And they're a freshman or a sophomore or a junior or even a senior, and they finally played well. And they have an extra year of eligibility, and then they go and transfer to an Arkansas. They transfer over to a big school that's like, hey, we need a 6'7" wing. Do you really want to be the best player at McNeese, or do you want to be the third best player on a team that might be the best team in the country? So I think that is shifting. I think that's probably going to have a bigger effect on college basketball than it is on college football from a year in and year out standpoint. You're still going to have those mid-majors that like Drake was decent this year. Or teams that kind of win a game or two, but I don't think you're going to see that consistency year in and year out from those mid-majors as much, because I think those guys are going to end up transferring. Someone's going to be like, I give Kalkbrenner, the big dude from Creighton, some credit. He was there for a long time.
Yeah.
And like, if he had an extra year of eligibility, you're telling me that somebody wouldn't throw $1 million at him to be like, hey, we could use a 7'1" big man who's pretty all-round skilled, especially in the college game. I think that like it's impressive that he stayed, but I also think that like as we get further into this NIL era, I think there's going to be just more of that, where you have a guy who was really good for a year or two or got good and then transferred. And so now they're the star at look at Auburn. Their star player, Johnny Broome, was at do you remember where he was at before?
No, I don't recall.
Where was he? He was at Morehead State.
Okay.
And Morehead State was a pretty awesome team.
Yeah.
But they really lost one of their best players to Auburn via transfer. And that's tough. I just don't know that the mid-majors are going to be able to continue to compete.
Yeah, I think for sure it appears to be trending in that direction. And I think, we've talked about it on other shows about just kind of trends that occur. I think these things cycle. I think in the NFL, you're starting to see the cycle of maybe running backs coming back a little bit, or we'll see that, wide receiver bubble pop. And I just think everything is very cyclical over time. And so I think there's a good chance maybe we do have a few years here at least. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 5, where the mid-majors aren't doing as much. And then I assume we'll start to see some kind of shift, whether it's, big name players being like, all right, well, everybody's at Duke now, right? Because, they're handing out the money, everybody's here. I'm only scoring 6 points a game when I could be averaging 30 at McNeese. And then then all of a sudden it's going to revert back to some of that a little bit. I also think with the NIL stuff, and I don't know all the rules behind it, but I don't know if you heard Magic Johnson had come out and said like he would pay any amount of money it takes in NIL stuff for Michigan State to win a championship while he's alive. And it's like, if you got somebody who's a billionaire or close to a billionaire, if they're even a slight fan, I mean, I don't know where Mark Cuban actually went to school, but it's just like, the dude's a huge basketball guy. He's a billionaire. It's like, why wouldn't you just throw any money at these people? A lot of them go to big, well-known schools, but you also run into people that go to tiny schools that, it just happened. I was talking to somebody, going to Lake Forest College. We had Ripon College was in our conference. Harrison Ford went to Ripon College. Now, similar to your thought process, he did probably, as he realized his skill set, he transferred and went somewhere else. Maybe is kind of your point, but he still had to have ties there. It's like that's the school that got him started or got him interested in films, whatever it is. Like that dude can't, again, he might not be a sports fan. I don't know, but you got to think a lot of these small schools have some people who have, I mean, you could be a no-name tech wizard and made some serious money where, you want to give back in ways. So I do agree in the short term, it does appear, I mean, just in like a single year almost, pretty obvious that is going to be tough for them to compete. But I'm thinking and hoping for the tournament's sake. I mean, some of that chaos, those upsets, they're what makes it so interesting. I agree. I think Colin Cowherd said it before. It's like, you don't really want to see the Cinderella, and then they get smoked at some point. It's like, true, down the road. I like to see them win a game, though. I mean, seeing those big upsets in the first round and then putting up a good fight in the second and losing, I think is well worth it. Yeah, you get St. Peter's or whoever it was making the Sweet 16 or, whatever, and then they get crushed. Yeah, I do prefer to see the Blue Bloods. I prefer to see the big names that we all like. But the tournament, those upsets and stuff early on, I think is so much of the intrigue that if that does fully disappear, somehow, some way, they'll figure out a way to get things cycled back, to what it was, I guess.
Yeah, and I still think you'll see those first round upsets, maybe not with the same frequency, maybe a little less, but I think those deeper runs are going to be tougher because you're just not going to get these mid-major programs. Like I remember, back when Fred VanVleet was at Wichita State, that's where he was at, and those guys. And I feel like they had like a 3-year run where like the first year they made the tournament and everyone was like, oh, this Wichita State team's kind of fun. The next year they were pretty good. They made it further. And the following year they were like a legit, like I don't remember if they were a 1 seed or not, but like they were super highly rated. Now they ended up getting, I think, flamed out pretty early that year, but I don't know that you're going to see that as much. And that's, hopefully I'm wrong, but, certainly.
I was gonna say, you'll see with some of these NIL deal too. I mean, in today's world with social media and how that stuff works, I think you could have a weird kind of Wichita State type of team that gains some momentum. They have just kind of this bond. They start to see a little bit of success. They take advantage of that on social media. They become some kind of following or crowd. And then before you know it, these NIL, these sponsors come over there and be like, hey, you guys are picking up a lot of steam on social media. We'll pay you while you're at, McNeese or wherever it is. Just reminds me of like McNeese's manager. I mean, he's the first manager to ball boy to get an NIL deal, and he's at McNeese. So, that kind of, I guess, gives me that hope is like,
well, now he's gone.
Well, yes, exactly. Again, I mean, some of it is, the truth is right there, staring in the face. But, I think there's at least year in and year out. To your point, yeah, maybe you become a senior and you finally are good or finally seen. But if you come as a freshman, you are pretty good as a freshman. You know what I mean? Like there should be at least like these 1 years, and then maybe they transfer. But then maybe it's another mid-major. The next, I think hopefully there's enough of that talent to go around to those schools where, yeah, I don't think you'll see the same team consistently be good for 3, 4, 5 years, but you should be able to see some others. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. It's obviously changing how things are done pretty drastically. So I think some teams, some players just have to figure out how they want it to look. But yeah, it was interesting not to see too many upsets the first round.
Yeah. So, kind of, somewhat moving on, but still on the same subject. And you kind of alluded to who you think you have as the winner, but maybe outside of Duke, who do you think could potentially challenge them or has the best shot at winning if it isn't Duke that wins?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not them, I mean, it's one of the tournaments always funny, and it has been fairly chalky as we just discussed. But, it's so funny when you're filling out a bracket, and it's like, how do you not just keep picking the best team on? I mean, that's the only thing you can do is say who is better. because we know the chaos that typically occurs, you try and look for those teams, say, where is maybe they're a weak spot or why this team would match up well. But yeah, it's pretty hard to go through the bracket the first time and not have 4 1 seeds in the final 4. It's really difficult unless you feel like someone was misseeded, a 2 seed, someone slid into the 2 seed spot. So yeah, I think it'd be hard not to look at all the 1 seeds really. I think Auburn's looked really good. They probably have had one of the better highs of the season, but I just don't know if I trust their consistency in college basketball. I like to have some size, some stability, the ability to slow a game down. Like when games get tight, when there's pressure in these tournaments, I think you need to fall on that. They seem just a little unpredictable at times. So I would probably go with Florida. I mean, that is who I took against Duke in the championship. And, similarly, I think both teams can absolutely be beat, right? They can have an off night and someone can play really well. But I think if you're just looking at what we've seen to this point, how the teams are constructed, I mean, Florida is big. It's one of the things I like about Duke. I mean, Duke's starting 7'2", 6'9", 6'7", 6'6", 6'6". It's like when your shortest guy is 6'6" in college, like that's some serious size. Florida is very similar. They're big. They have depth. So I think they're pretty good. And I would probably take them if I wasn't taking Duke. But again, I look at Duke, and as much as anything can happen in this tournament, and the best team doesn't always win, I just think the way that they're structured, it's going to be really tough for them to have such a bad night that they do lose. It would take another team playing just almost perfect basketball, I think, for them to really struggle. I mean, I just mentioned their size. They have the best player in the country. And again, the way he plays, it's not like you just focus in on him. He's not playing like James Harden where you're just going to focus on him. He's just letting the other guys do their stuff, and he gets his when it makes sense.
Like, you can't double Cooper Flagg as a defensive strategy and think that's going to win you the game.
No.
That just doesn't, you have to just figure out a way to defend man to man, or maybe if you think a zone could work, but doubling him isn't going to do anything because he will just pass the ball. He does not care.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean. Yeah, the numbers don't matter. It's just play to win. I think John Shire is a great coach, and I think those guys are fully bought in on what he
White
does.
Mike, baby.
But they're just one of those weird teams where I think, again, I mentioned some of these teams that have been the top seeds or whatever, but they have, Zion and RJ and Cam Reddish. You got 3 of the top 5 recruits, and it's kind of an all-star basketball, and Kentucky's done it. Those teams are difficult to get everybody on the same page, to not have them almost fighting over things. I know you don't see it typically on the court, but there's a little resentment and not playing. You get in your head, you play worse. I mean, their center, I don't know, was it
Malawak? I think Malawak.
It's like that dude, I don't know if he's the number 1 center in the country or the number 5. He's got to be up there. But that dude is just same thing. He could score 1 point or 50. I don't think he cares. I don't think he even knows what he's scoring in a game. And he's freaking good, and he's huge. I mean, you got Knuppel. That dude can shoot it again. He seems like a role player, and he's excellent. And they give these guys their chance. I mean, you got Tyrese Proctor is 6'6", shooting 42% from 3. Again, he's not your all-star stud. He's just there, and he's great. I just think the construction of the team is very team-focused. I think there's talent across the board. I just don't see all of them having such terrible nights. And again, it would take another team. I mean, Florida wouldn't have to play a perfect game to beat them, but a lot of these teams would have to play near perfect to beat them, I think. So I like Duke as the favorite, but yeah, I'd probably have to go Florida as the next one to upset them.
Yeah, I mean, Florida is who I had meeting up with Duke in the championship, so I think we're pretty much the same on those, and for the same reasons. I mean, Florida's long, they're athletic, they're pretty skilled. They're kind of a tough matchup for most college basketball teams this year. I think the game they just played against UConn is a good example of, if you have continuity and a really good, well-coached team, you could potentially beat Florida if you're maybe not as good as them. But UConn had to play their asses off to keep that game as tight as it was. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Maryland has a chance. I really like that Derek Queen, that big dude that they've got.
Yeah.
I mean, he hit that big shot against Colorado State, and that was money. A little, kind of fadeaway, midi, bank shot running as time expires. I mean,
impressive.
That was sweet. So I think Maryland's a pretty solid team, but I mean, Maryland's going to have to play basically their perfect game to beat Florida. And I think that's kind of the trouble that most teams are going to have facing Florida, other than Duke, where Duke can come in and pretty much match up. They're not going to be as athletic maybe at like the guard spots, but they're going to be so much bigger inside. And I don't know how you defend that little like pick and roll that Flagg does, where he comes barreling down the lane and then throws it up to Malawak for an alley-oop. Like, the amount of times I saw them, do that in this last game was insane. They just toss it up, and I mean, Flagg is literally just constantly looking for the big man to just throw it down. And he's shooting 70% from the field this year.
That's insane.
I mean, that's awesome. Like, that shows you what kind of quality shots he's getting, which are lobs to the rim. So
yeah. I think both those teams too are got to be top, near the top in the country in offense and offensive efficiency and point score and all that stuff. But again, none of them appear as kind of this like insane scoring team, right? They don't come off that way. They do score a lot. They're just very efficient in the way that they do it. But I also think on the defensive end, a lot of people like Houston, and I love their defensive energy. I don't think they're good enough on offense to beat some of these better teams. Their defense is great. Maybe it's the best in the country, but I think Duke and, Florida are right there, maybe a very notch below that defense, but the offense is 10 times better than Houston. I just don't think Houston's defense would be able to slow them down enough. And I know their offense is not good enough to keep up with either of theirs. That's where Auburn could sneak in, something like that. They do have the offensive firepower. I think they can get after it defensively. So, anything can obviously happen in these games, in this tournament. But I just think, it'd be hard not to look at those two teams and say, you got to pick them. If you're putting every dollar you got, it's got to go on one of them, I think.
Yeah, I think Duke, Florida, they're on a collision course right now for the championship game, which should be a good game. I mean, I think that's hopefully Duke gets to play Houston along the way, and Houston doesn't, fumble it beforehand, because I would like to see Duke play Houston, given their defensive prowess, like you mentioned. I think it would be a good test for them, to see kind of, okay, what are you really made of when you play a team that's going to be hyperactive on defense the whole game. Should be good. Should be a good rest of the tournament, just simply by the fact that like there shouldn't be a ton of blowouts. I wouldn't expect. Yeah. Not with all the the chalky teams kind of advancing.
With that.
Yeah, let's switch gears quite a bit here actually, and go to a little professional golf. I don't know how many people watched this tournament last weekend, the Valspar, but turns out it was a pretty good one. You got to, if you did tune in and you weren't watching March Madness, or you were trying to watch a little golf while you were watching your March Madness, you got to see Justin Thomas and Victor Hovland dueling it out, which is pretty exciting because both of those dudes have been struggling to various degrees and for various amounts of time. But I mean, Hovland, even earlier this last week, made the comments about how he hits the ball and he looks up and the ball's in a completely different window than he expects. And he's like, I don't know how to play like that. And then he wins a tournament. So, I don't know if that's just kind of chalk it up to, that's golf, or is it maybe a sign that, JT and Victor are kind of working through their struggles and might be poised to kind of be back to where they were before? What do you think?
Yeah, well, a couple of things just to your point. Yeah, a lot of people probably didn't watch the tournament. I know it flipped it on like on TV. It would just be like the last channel that was on in a different place in the house. And I would see the leaderboard and I'm like, yeah, of course I'm not watching that during March Madness. I happened to flip it on Sunday morning at some point, and all of a sudden I see both their names up there. So I'm texting with my friend. I'm like, I got to check this golf tournament out. Actually, of course, it's like during March Madness, we actually look like we're going to have a kind of head-to-head duel going at it. So I did watch most of Sunday and did not see a whole lot of the tournament before that. But and then it's funny you mentioned the interview. That was, I think he was down maybe 2 still at this point, or maybe it was about to be 1 because Justin Thomas had bogeyed, whatever it was, 17, I think. But I was, texting some friends and I just said, I think I'm going with Hovland. I think, he's going to have some confidence coming in here at he already put himself in this position to be in second place this late in the tournament. That interview that he did, I think, in today's world, you see it a lot, but raw openness, honesty, being authentic. Like, people really appreciate that stuff. And him just like being a normal guy, like anybody who's ever golfed has said exactly what he said. Now, we've never had the same expectations that he's had, but you're just like, I don't know what to do, man. I played yesterday, it was pretty good. Now it's like I'm aiming here and it's going somewhere else. And I think everybody just like really respected him kind of sharing those feelings and emotions. Like, he didn't make excuses. He said, he's hard on himself, and that's why he's typically good, but he just can't figure out what's going on with it. And so I thought that'd give him some confidence at the end of the tournament, and it definitely did. I mean, he made that really nice putt on 17 was huge. 16 and 17 really to birdie those holes was incredible. But yeah, to your point of, is this going to set him up? I think there's a good chance of it. I think Justin Thomas has definitely been kind of moving along better. Obviously, he had a really nice peak, years and years ago. And so he's been struggling for a while, and he seems to kind of slowly be getting back into that. And he seemed really positive after this. Like, that would have been an easy one after all the struggles you have had to sit there and say, like, this was it. I needed to win this one, and you don't, and be really down. And he was actually in really good spirits about it. He was happy. He's back in the top 10 in the world golf ranking. He's got 2 runner-ups this year and another top 10. So, I mean, he's right there knocking on the door. He seems to be in some really good spirits. And then Hovland obviously gets the win. I mean, he was number 3 in the world at the end of 2023. I mean, he won the Tour Championship, the BMW Championship, a couple other wins that year. And so he had a very quick drop from that. And it's only been a year-ish, if you will, of trying to battle that back. So I saw some stuff he was trying to fix his swing even from that peak, thinking he could improve some stuff and make it better. And it seems like it obviously went the exact opposite. But I do think this weekend as a whole could easily be one that propels him a little bit forward. You get the win. Again, you kind of have that interview that is very well received by the public and fans. I think he got a lot of support for that, which probably helped. So yeah, I think they're both going to be looking a bit better. But again, I'd probably say of the two, even though he lost, I like JT's, trajectory at this point as far as like where he would finish the year from where he's at. I like maybe a little better. Just because, Hovland's been really struggling, and, you maybe have one good pop, but all of a sudden those swing thoughts start getting in your head and maybe you start dealing with it again. So just a little too quick for Hovland. But hopefully he gets it going. It's, the game's better when better players are playing well. So, it was a great tournament, great finish. And yeah, I think they're both at least heading in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to see 2 golfers with a little pedigree, duking it out in a tournament. If you watched, or if our viewers or listeners watched, the Players Championship, just a couple weeks ago, obviously, Rory wins that, but you get a lot of guys up there like, JJ Spawn or, Bud Cauley, what was it? Smiley, the Smiley dude. Like, there's a lot of guys that were up at that top of that leaderboard that just hadn't really won much, and it's just like, I think that people like these golf when a golfer who hasn't broken through breaks through. I think people like even more is when the golfers that they know are good go out and play well.
Yeah.
And so that was obvious. That's obviously cool to see. It's a shame that all happened this weekend because I'm going to guess a ton of people didn't get to see it. Yeah. I mean, I will admit I watched almost no golf this weekend. And I usually am trying to tune in every weekend for the tournaments as long as there's, some decent names in it. Like, I'm not necessarily like, I don't know if I'll be watching the Texas Children's Houston Open this weekend, but I will probably watch the Valero Texas Open a little bit the following weekend, check that out a little bit because that leads right into the Masters. And sometimes you get, some guys who are kind of finding their swing that weekend. So hopefully they're both back though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think from the fan perspective, I do think, it's kind of the Cinderella thing in basketball we were just talking about. It's like, I think it's exciting and you appreciate to see someone new and break through. But I think the ideal is you flip on the screen and there's 5 names and recognize at the top of the leaderboard with one random, unexpected name that's in there battling it out with them. And whether that person pulls it out or one of the big names wins, I think that you like, because it kind of justifies the quality of the tournament when you're seeing big names up there competing. And if someone's better than those big names and breaks through, it's awesome and it's an incredible story. I think where you fans don't love it is when you flip it on, it's 7 names you've never heard of. And then, Rory's trying to, come in from 5th, and you're kind of like, what do we watch? Nothing too exciting. So I think because we have seen a little bit more of that recently with, Liv being out there. So some of the golfers are just on the other tour. And, people are getting better every day. I mean, there's younger players always getting better. So that is going to happen. But I think because we've seen that, it was, like I said, I flipped it on. If I wouldn't have seen their 2 names at the top, I would have just probably went back to basketball. But I saw their names, like, all right, I got to check this out. This could be a really good finish. And it was, it was a really fun finish to see. So, yeah, hopefully, I think all the top players you want to see playing well. And then you get, like you said, these JJ Spawn, Bud Collins, like, happy for those guys, and you love to see them in there getting in the mix. You just want to be mixing it up with the other top players. Like, that's how you're going to give yourself the credibility you deserve if you're playing that well.
So, I mean, speaking of guys who are playing well, you have any early favorites for the Masters? We're 3 weeks out. Who do you think is going to bring home the green jacket this year?
So I got not anybody, I'm not picking any, total dark horses here, but they're, not the favorite. Hard not to like Scheffler, in a lot of spots. I mean, the guy, he won it last year. He's obviously still the best golfer out there. Hasn't, he's not in quite the top form he was last year to start this year. I mean, it's still early. But yeah, I think just knowing you won it is hard, even though he has repeated other tournaments, to go back. So if I was going to go somebody else, I went with 2 different guys that I'm kind of liking right now. But I think Bryson is attractive. He tied 6th there last year. He was 2nd at the PGA Championship. He won the U.S. Open. So he's played really well in some big tournaments most recently. Liv, he hasn't won any yet this year, but he's got 2 top 10s this year. So he's playing good golf. So I like him. I also think Rory's got a chance to break through. He was tied 22nd last year. So not terrible, not incredible, but not too shabby. He obviously just won the Players.
There's going to be a lot of grown men crying if Rory wins the Masters.
If Rory wins it.
That's, maybe picture it already.
Gets that monkey off the back. I think it feels like the right time for it. Both of those guys, partly kind of why I liked them and lumped them together, both of them have been very polarizing figures at different times for different reasons. And both of them, I would say, seem to be at like the best spot they've maybe ever been in their career. Definitely in a long, long time. Bryson doing the YouTube stuff now, like people love the guy when they used to hate him. Couldn't stand him. And all of a sudden, he's really got everything going in that regard, which I think is just giving him more peace on the course to be able to play carefree golf. And Rory, for, again, different reasons, but similarly, all the Liv stuff. He was one of the most vocal guys about it, really bashing people. And as much as you could be a PGA supporter, I think you even felt maybe the amount of time he was spending on that stuff, the energy, the way he would go about it. You were like, I don't know if I love all that. And he's really done a 180. And I'm not saying no one thinks that he's a hypocrite, and going back on his word. Some people probably do. But I think most people, even fans, have come around a little bit like, yeah, maybe we didn't like the idea of Liv, but like, whatever. At the end of the day, we want the best golfers to get together. And he's just taken that approach. I think that has freed him up internally. I think he seems to be more appeased, clearly playing that way. Yes, the AT&T was with Shane Lowry. They probably should have won that, but they did. It's still a PGA win. And then he wins the Players there. I think he's got to be not only feeling really good about his game, but I think just mentally he's got to feel like he's at peace. I don't think he's going to be going into this match like, I have to win. Like, please let me finally do this. I think he's going as like, hey, I'm just going to play another golf tournament. Like, if I win it, awesome. If not, I'm only, not 35 years old. I got plenty of years. It'll happen. I just think that mentality, if he is going in that way, which I think he is, I think he could put something together and finally make that happen. So I like both of those guys.
Yeah, I think those are both good picks. I definitely like Rory's chances this year more than I've liked them in years past, for various reasons. Some of it you mentioned. There's just sometimes I feel like he kind of gets in his own way, especially with the media. Like when saying nothing would be totally fine, and he just like says stuff, and you're just like, buddy, I would just have kept that to myself. Like,
yeah,
or told people in private. Like, that's probably just not something you want to like have people questioning you about now, or have people, asking you even normal basic questions. Like, you don't need to be giving any thought to some of the stuff that he's done. But, I think this year he seems to be in a bit of a different mindset. He kind of seems almost playing like he's pissed off a little bit. And I do think there's something to that. Like, I think when you're as talented as he is, especially like the way he golfs, I mean, when you're driving the ball as far as he's driving, I think playing a little pissed off probably is somewhat helpful, because you can kind of really like zone in on those drives, like, and just mash them, especially when you're of his skill set. The biggest thing will be, what does he do with the putter? But he has looked a little better this year. I mean, he's won 2 events already, including the Players, which I think that was a good win. That was a tough weekend. The weather was crazy. He had to kind of battle some adversity just like himself, like kind of falling back a little bit and having to work his way, climb his way back through. He played really well on Sunday to get himself into that position. So I like Rory a lot. I do like the Bryson pick, but I think Colin Morikawa might be the guy. And what's weird is when he first started winning tournaments a couple years ago, when he won those, the PGA and the Open, I feel like I liked him more then. I almost don't like him as much now, and I don't know why that is. And it's not just because he hasn't won recently, but there's something about him that I haven't loved recently in terms of just like his demeanor and vibes. I think he's playing some pretty good golf. He should have won the Arnold Palmer, kind of blew that. And he's been, all these top 5 finishes. He played pretty well at the Players again. I think he could be the guy that, surprises people and just wins another major all of a sudden. Like, after, not winning for a few years, he just comes out and just like, yeah, I'll just win the Masters. And then he will have won 3 of 4 majors, which is starting to put him in some rarefied air. But I think right now he's kind of flying under the radar in that respect, though. Like, no one's talking about that because, why would they? That's like, there's so many things that need to happen for him. But I think that, that's probably who I would go with. Scotty, I just don't think is playing well enough right now. We'll see. I mean, he plays Augusta really well. And as well as, anybody since Tiger, basically. He plays that course incredibly well. But I'm not sure that I'm confident enough that Scotty's, mental game is dialed in right now. So that's who I got.
No, those are interesting. I looked at Morikawa. Yeah, the name I just came across. I was kind of looking at like odds to win and whatnot. Yeah, he was never one that I really wanted to pick, but I was like, yeah, he played really well in a couple tournaments recently. I think he played really well at the Masters last year, if I recall. I don't remember exactly where he finished, but so he did come across something similar though. Like, I also don't think I like him as much now as I did, and I don't know if there's been a whole lot of stuff that's changed other than like one thing. You mentioned like Rory playing mad. I think that's something that Colin's never really shown, and clearly he's won some big tournaments and he has a pretty good start to his career. You don't have to be like angry or mad or like ultra competitive, always to be able to win. But it does make me think I would bet on someone like that more often. You think of the Brysons at times, or the Brooks Koepka, like these guys who look like they're ultra competitors and like can kind of get like a little mean, a little nasty and stuff. Like, Colin just has never come off that way to me. And I think that's almost what I've started to see is like, I think he's maybe trying to do that, and it's coming off really bad. Like, he called out, what's his name? I think Glover on the putter thing when he mentioned the aim point, and then he went after his thing. And then there was just something the other day I saw in an interview, and I was just kind of like, it wasn't inappropriate or wrong, but it was like coming from him felt weird, and it felt like forced. Like he was purposely trying to be like, I want to be very direct, and I want to be and it was kind of like, that's not your style though, like Bryson made a change, and it feels like it's now being him more, like he's becoming himself, whereas Morikawa feels like he's trying to be someone he's not. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're in the right zone there. I just don't think it seems authentic. Yeah. Because he's showing like a little bit of like pissiness when things don't go like well, which, I'm fine with that. Like, if things aren't going well, like, be upset about it. You are a professional golfer. You are trying to be the best, not just go out there and collect a paycheck, I'm sure. But like, I don't see that fieriness like when things are like going well for him, which is, I think, is a distinction between like him and a Bryson. Like when Bryson does something good, like he gets excited about it. And I think people relate to that. And then when he's upset about something, like he can sometimes get a little on the pissier side about it. But you get the high upside too when he hits an incredible shot and he's got his putter in the air and he's like, fist pumping and jacking up the crowd and stuff. Like, I don't think you can be like what Colin's being. I think what you may have saw, which I think is what I saw, he apparently didn't do an interview after the Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
And then when he was asked about it, he like got super defensive and was just like, I don't have to answer to any of you. Like
that's exactly what it was. I was just looking through. I was trying to figure out like, what was it that I saw? Yeah, you're exactly right. He decided to leave after. And then the reporter, I listened to the whole thing and he was just kind of like, yeah, you didn't talk to the media afterwards. Like, was there any reason behind it or anything like that? And it'd be one thing to just be like, well, yeah, the reason was I'm super pissed. I mean, but like the way he was like, yeah, I mean, I just was pissed, didn't want to talk to anybody. And then like nobody said anything back to that. No one gave him even any push, kind of like, well, we get it. Everyone gets pissed after, but like you still got like, no one even said anything. And then he was like, I don't owe anybody anything. No offense. But I saw someone kind of comment on after and was like, but you do. Like, that is part of why these sponsors and these things like media is a part of that stuff. Why do you think these guys, they may get fined or, Marshawn Lynch, I'm here so I don't get fined. It's like, that is part of
hate
the
when
job.
Players do that, honestly. And any
sport, that's what I mean.
Because you want to make all this money, fine. Nobody's going to complain about you making millions of dollars playing golf. But part of the trade-off is I want to hear you talk about your golf game right after it happens, whether you won or lost.
Correct.
Like, I want you to be like, I don't want to just be like, I've never heard from these people. Oh, that's weird. Like, can you imagine watching basketball games or football games and you've never heard any of the players speak because they don't let them have media? Like, that's how they get the money.
That's part of it. Yeah. So to say that, and again, it was like unprovoked too. The guy, like the reporter, didn't respond like, well, I get you were pissed. Everybody is who loses, but you still should have talked. And then he was like, well, I don't know. Like, that would have made a little more sense. He said it pretty unprovoked, like in that moment. And it was just like super weird. Cause it's like, yeah, that is a part of why you're getting paid, is to do that stuff. So yeah, you kind of do owe it to everybody and you should have done it. But that was exactly, then the guy called him out and then he said he like stands by and it was like the whole way he handled it was just like, it just didn't feel like it was him. It felt like he was trying to be something he's not. And those are certain moments sometimes where I look at, I think they're still doing it. Was it the PIP or whatever, how they like the most social media that Tiger Woods seems to win just like every year just for being alive. Like, those things. There was something else I saw the other day too, and I can't remember what it was, but I was like, that felt like it was like no one brought it up, but I thought in my head, I'm like, that would actually be a pretty interesting, thing to do, because like you're not going to get in trouble. It's not a problem, but like that's going to blow up social media, and it almost feels a little bit like that to me. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know. It just like I think it was Tiger Woods swinging the wrong club at the TGL stuff.
Yeah.
It's like he swung a pitching wedge when he was 200 yards out or whatever. And it's like every person had to Google that and see like what happened, how it went. Some of these things make me wonder, it's like, are they trying to go for that? Like, is Colin trying to like be like, oh, everyone's going to search my, interview but I think that's exactly what it was. And I was like, it doesn't feel like him. It feels like he's trying to be something he's not. And I don't think people in general are enjoying it. At least I'm not.
Yeah. So after trash talking Colin's attitude, I do still think he's playing good golf, and
good luck with
that. I think there's a good chance that he puts it all together. I would not be surprised if he was one of the guys that emerges at the top of the leaderboard, or even wins the whole thing. So, good luck to all of them. I'm sure we'll have some more Augusta talk before the Masters. Let's go to basketball, the professional kind, the National Basketball Association, where we're winding down here in the regular season, and we've got ourselves I would say a relatively interesting Western Conference playoff race. Especially from the, kind of like that 3 seed to the play-in. And there's a lot of teams that kind of get moved around, some big names in there, some teams that, I think have overachieved, teams have underachieved. But, what are you seeing kind of as we get into this, final, 12, 13 games of the season? How do you see this kind of shaking out from your perspective?
Yeah, I think as much as to your point, there's some interesting stuff. There's some good battles, some things like that going on. I do feel we all know obviously it's not March Madness for there's 7-game series and typically the better team is going to win. I feel like outside of any significant injuries, that of course can absolutely derail a team. I think there's only really one question mark to me. Other than that, I feel pretty confident in certain teams. So if I was really going to try and list the order, I think I would take the Lakers number one, maybe a little bit of bias towards LeBron, but I really do for some reasons that I'll share. I think they would be my first pick. I think Denver is my second, and the Thunder are the third. And I think the Thunder are the question mark. That to me is the only team that, like, I don't think Memphis is all of a sudden going to be better than they've been this year. I don't think the Timberwolves are going to click and all of a sudden be the number one team that's in there. These teams are showing us what they're capable of. Then the question becomes, can they do it in the playoffs? Can they do it when the other team is throwing every single thing at them? Right? That's kind of the difference that I look at it. The Denver Nuggets, I think most would agree, have a top 3 starting 5 in all of the NBA. Probably Boston, maybe the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers probably not because they have Jackson Hayes, even though he's fitting the role. But Denver's got that. They just don't have a lot of depth. But when it comes to the playoffs, sure, Jokic can play 42 minutes, if he has to. Like these are the playoffs. You make it happen. Rotations get cut down from 10 guys to 7 guys, or from 9 guys to whatever it is. So I just think we've seen what they're capable of. They're not the team that won the championship, but you have the best player in the world. We've seen him perform on the largest stages. You got Jamal Murray, you got Aaron Gordon, you got all these guys. So that team I think is really good where they're at. The Lakers, we've seen it now. It's a big enough sample size when you have LeBron and Luka together healthy, what they're capable of. The defense has been number one in the league since he got there. The offense, whatever the numbers say, I think they're going to be the best offense, the hardest offense to stop when they're both healthy and good. JJ Redick is clearly a good coach. Anybody who was questioning that, I don't not only think he's a good coach, I think he's really smart, and I think that defense is partly coming from him. I think it's the way they're running different stuff, the way they're throwing teams off, I think is going to be huge. Again, they were doing it now, but it's going to be different in the playoffs too. They're going to come with different strategies, different looks, and I think that's something when you start thinking about the Thunder now, who again, I kind of have in third as that question mark. We've seen what they're doing during the regular season, but we've also seen that time and time and time again is younger teams that are trying to prove themselves care about winning in the regular season. They think, and to some degree it does, will give them the respect that they deserve. And they get it for the regular season, but you don't get it until you've proven it in the playoffs. Now, they the last couple of years, they've been knocking on the door, getting into the playoffs, having some series. So maybe they have gone through all those growing pains and they truly can win the West and or possibly the finals. It still feels a little early to me. They still feel a little young and a little inexperienced. So that's why I just throw, yes, we've seen what they can look like, but they're going against, LeBron's 40 years old. The guy's going to rest sometimes. He's not, they're going to see that in the regular season where you're not going to see that in the playoffs. I also think with Shea, he's shooting 9 free throws a game. Harden is the next closest below him at 7.5. He's shooting 1.5 more than Harden, and then it's Harden, Trae Young, and Brunson. Brunson, I guess, is fairly arguable, but those guys have in common is they haven't really performed that well in the playoffs, and I think a lot of that is you're not getting the same calls. Doesn't mean you won't get a good amount of foul calls, but I think everyone's seeing, like, it's one thing to, foul bait, get guys to actually fall for your fakes and commit fouls. It's another to be wrapping your arm around someone else, making it look like he did it and getting foul calls. So I think Shea's not going to get quite the same calls that he's getting now. Playoffs just typically we let the guys play more, let the guys determine the game. So I don't think he's going to get that same call. I think defenses are going to, not only just the Lakers, but defenses in general are going to guard him differently and take him away. And unlike Cooper Flagg for, Duke, you take away Shea, they don't have like this incredible ensemble of players around. They have some good players that are playing really well in their roles, but like I'll let Chet Holmgren try and, beat me one-on-one with everybody and see what happens. So they could be the best team in there. But I think just with the question marks that I personally have, I would still probably take the Lakers coming out of there. I like the Lakers in Denver a little bit more than the Thunder. I think everybody else is who we think they are. Houston, good regular season, too young to really make noise. Again, Memphis, Timberwolves, just not quite stacking up to those other teams. So that's kind of in general how I see it going there.
Yeah, I think I'm again pretty much spot on with you here on the Western Conference too. I think OKC is a year away, and I think they probably need to make one move and bring in another like bona fide star. And they've got so many resources. I don't see that being an issue. I think they'll be able to do it. Just kind of a matter of like, who do they bring in? I think the perfect candidate for them is obviously Kevin Durant. You bring him back, homecoming, get a chance to these Oklahoma City fans, they do not like Durant. They're upset with him because he left the city. Now, I think that, that's not all on him. At the end of the day, management basically picked Russell Westbrook over him and kind of drove him to that decision. But this is an opportunity for him to come back home. If he wins a championship coming back home to OKC, I think his legacy looks a lot friendlier. Like right now, I think everyone thinks of KD as like this great basketball player, probably one of the best scorers of all time. But just, no one thinks of him as a top 10 player of all time, not even close, because he just didn't really affect winning enough. But I think he put on that team with the Thunder, all of a sudden you've got a real look. But obviously they don't have that this year. I love the Lakers as long as they're healthy. I think that's the team to beat in the West. I just don't think you can play defense against LeBron and Luka effectively for 7 games in a row. I think it's just really difficult to stop both of those guys from scoring and facilitating all night long when you have 2 of them on the same team. And I do like Denver. Denver's obviously got, some pedigree. I think they're a little thin, and I think that honestly, I think for the first time in a while, they don't match up well with the Lakers. Defensively, they just don't. And I think that's tough. So I really think the West is kind of a matter of like, does OKC actually take a big step forward this year, which most teams just don't historically do? Or is it the old guys in the Lakers who, come through? I'm not sure I feel... I just don't feel good about any of the other, Western Conference teams like confidently. I think Houston has played way better than they actually are.
Yeah.
For a record, like I think they're a couple years away from being like real contenders. I just don't see them having. I think for them, if they win their first round series, like I'd be like, that's a successful season. Like I know you're probably going to be the 2 seed maybe, but like you could also easily be the 6 seed with like a bad run here. So like it's not like you were the 2 seed and easily the 2 seed like in the East where it's like, yeah, Boston clearly a very good 2 seed. So we'll see about that.
Talk about things cycling, over time. That's one thing I think has changed with the NBA, where it was usually pretty typical that the best teams were going to be at the top. We've talked, nauseam about load management and stuff like that. But I think teams were starting to see that and understand that and say, why kill ourselves to try and get these, first place, second place, if we're still going to end up playing this team or that team. It doesn't make a huge difference. And if we can go into the playoffs fresher and whatnot, it's worthwhile. So I do think that's something that's changed in the NBA. And so to your point, yeah, you could be a 2 seed and you could really not be all that great. You got to be at least decent and you have to have played some good basketball. But you might not truly be that good. So yeah, I think that any series, if they win it, I think would be great for them. But yeah, I think the Lakers, too, the big deal. I was going to say either one of them is going to have a battle against the Celtics, assuming they get to that point, which I think they will. I think LeBron's got to be
the NBA wants Lakers Celtics so bad.
Well, that it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I know it's not rigged. I would never even think it's rigged.
But to your point, yeah, it feels like it's like a match made in heaven kind of thing. And like, how many years does LeBron have left? If he thinks that winning a championship is even a possibility, which I guarantee he does, he said it for sure, you got to think this is it. You are rejuvenated just with this I mean, I've done it in 2K. It's like, you run back the same dynasty 3 years and you're like, yeah, let's trade AD just to get a new guy in here that'll be fun to play with. And I think that there's something to that in real life. He's just like, I loved AD. We were friends. He's a great player, but it's like, oh, all of a sudden this is kind of new and fun and fresh. And now you're looking and seeing it's actually working. So first you just got a little pep in your step. Now it's like, wow, this is actually working. Now you got to be thinking, if it's not this year, next year, as you're a year older, is it going to be better chance? Like, you got to start thinking it is declining every year, at least a little bit. And so I just think if he's looking at like, hey, this gelled pretty quickly. This is fun. This is exciting. If it's not this year, then it might be never. And I think that's going to be an edge where, again, not that OKC isn't going to play harder to do it, but I think subconsciously, you're up and coming, you're on the move, you got a lot of great years. The Lakers are going to kind of, and same with Luka. He's got to be sitting there saying, I have years, but how many years do I have with LeBron at this level playing this way? Do I want to take advantage of that opportunity? So I think all that stuff is going to be working in their favor. And yeah, I don't think the NBA is rigging it, but a Lakers, Celtics, LeBron, his last ring or potential last ring. The Celtics might go down history as one of the better teams and better, who knows what they do if they win a few rings. I know right now it still doesn't feel like they are, but if they win a few rings, they could go down as one of those teams. So I think that's a pretty high likelihood in my book.
Well, yeah, you think about this Celtics team also, made the finals and lost a couple years back to Golden State.
True. Yeah.
And we're knocking at the doorstep year after year, kind of leading up to last year when they won. So yeah, if Boston can come out and win back-to-back this year, and obviously their core of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, seemingly have a lot of years left in their prime. I think Jason Tatum is like 27.
Yeah.
You don't expect him to play to the level that LeBron is playing at his age, but you got to still think, can Jason Tatum do what he does now until he's 35? Probably close, at least, barring any major injuries. He doesn't rely on crazy athleticism. He is a really good athlete.
Yeah.
He doesn't rely on it, just like LeBron. Like, LeBron never relied on the fact that he could, he had a 50-inch vertical. Like, you're seeing it now. Like, he's lost a lot of the same, like those hops that he had in his early years, and he's still just as good, except for maybe defensively.
Yeah.
Which it's pretty hard to be a great defensive player when you're 40.
Yeah. They also got a lot of those role players locked in too. Not just age-wise being appropriate, but like they're under contract. They got a lot of these guys all locked up where they got a few years of going at it. So you already have the familiarity, you have the experience now doing it. You run as many as you can with the exact same group. And then, yes, even as some contracts come up or people get older, at least you still have the main core of those two guys, together. So yeah, they look good, and yeah, they're somehow quietly doing that, which, like you said, they were in the finals before this last one that they won, and it's still kind of like, do we trust them? Are they that good? It's like, yeah, I think they're pretty good.
I also think, something else with the playoffs that this playoff race that I noticed is, the very bottom of the Western Conference right now in the playoff race, you've got Phoenix Suns in at the 10 for the play-in, and you got the Mavs sitting there just outside of that. And those are two teams that obviously have got to feel pretty disappointed with how things have gone. The Mavericks were in the finals last year with Luka Doncic. And right now, like, I guarantee you there was not a single Mavs fan, that would have said a year from now, we'd like to, a year removed from the finals, we'd like to be missing the playoffs and we don't have Luka Doncic anymore. Like, it's insane how things have gone for them.
Crazy.
And then the Phoenix Suns, like, how impressive does it make it look that, LeBron had so much success in like the big three era there, with the Heat, but then also with the Cavs, like when they brought in Kevin Love and they paired him with Kyrie and LeBron, and just like, building that like super team, if you will, when you see all these other teams try and fail miserably. The Phoenix Suns were the team that everyone was like, it's going to work finally. Because they took a team that made the finals and they were like, let's inject Kevin Durant into that and then Bradley Beal. And as it turns out, it was a horrible decision. Their team is garbage. Their players hate their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Budenholzer's got like a 10-year contract they signed him to, like everybody else.
I mean, the Suns are shocking. I mean, these are all kind of topics you could really dive deep into for long. But when you mentioned Durant going to OKC, I was like, and really would have changed. I mean, just you try and watch these guys. Some I think we'll touch on too, Aaron Rodgers, but these guys like finishing their careers, and it's like you shouldn't sit there and say it hurts their career, but it is possible for it to happen. I don't think Michael Jordan going to the Wizards hurt his career by any means. He came back. He was pretty old at that point. The team was not good. You don't sit there. I mean, yes, it's a part of his career. It's something you have to mention and be a part of it. But I don't think you're sitting there saying that hurts his legacy. It is worth mentioning that it happened instead of just pretending only 6 years existed of his career. But it shouldn't really hurt it. But when you look at Kevin Durant, it's like you were sitting there, LeBron, and you back it. Like people wanted to put you as the best player in the world at time. I mean, I think LeBron always held it personally in my eyes, but there were plenty of people trying to say you were the best player. You're right there. You go to the finals with OKC. You lose to LeBron, very reasonable. Then you go to Golden State. You win finals MVP, 2 finals. I mean, if you would have stayed there, yes, you would have never gotten the credit like Steph Curry got or even like a LeBron doing what he had done at different places. But I think it would have at least cemented you, in that top 15, in that maybe top 10 of all time, because you can't refute it. But you choose to leave to basically go prove that you can do it on your own, that you can do something else. And you think about that. I mean, I don't know if there are any larger collapses that I've ever seen or just disappointments. You go to Brooklyn with the guys you want, the team you want, you got Kyrie and James. Everyone thought that was a cheat code. Like you're picking them on 2K. I mean, this team will not be, who can play defense against these guys? Maybe the worst team that existed in those 2-3 years. I get injuries were involved, but like that was just an embarrassment. Then you go to the Suns after they just were in the finals like that. And it's like KD's plug and play. He can go anywhere and be there. He doesn't need the ball. And to see them fully healthy and they're not even sniffing the actual playoffs, I mean, it truly is shocking. I mean, the Suns played the Bucks in the finals, so we got to see them closely. Even Booker himself, like, I don't know what that dude is doing, but you went from being considered kind of like a top 5, top 10 player in the NBA to I don't even know you. I mean, I don't hear your name. You are not talked about. No one even thinks of you.
People were putting Booker's name in the same sentences with Kobe.
Yeah,
they're like, we're not saying he's there yet, but like that's where his trajectory is, and then falls off a cliff.
And again, I mean, whether it's him, Durant, I don't know who to blame where it comes into there, but it is just absolutely shocking. And then the last thing I was just going to say, you mentioned like the big 3 era with LeBron. I think so much of the stuff that he's done. I mean, when you're that big of a name, you're going to be highly criticized, and you're going to have half people love you, half hate you. Like that's just pretty standard. But I do think the more time that goes on, the more impressive everything that he's done will be for people. Because you'll see what you thought was, he shouldn't get any credit. He formed a big 3. You'll say, like, well, look at this big 3. Look at this. Like, by the time, kind of time ends, like he retires and give it a few years after, you'll say, oh, there were 46 big 3s created since LeBron was in the NBA. 3 of them won championships. LeBron's 3 teams. Whatever it is, it's going to be like, so this wasn't a cheat code. This wasn't just, oh, this is the easy way to win. No one figured out how to do it but LeBron. Right? I think you'll see, winning in different places with different teams. You're going to look at Durant's career and say he played with Russell Westbrook and James Harden. OKC didn't win. Went to Golden State, did win with Clay and Steph. Okay, but then went here and didn't win. Went here and didn't win. He played. It's going to look like, oh, LeBron was able to do it in Miami, then in Cleveland, then in LA. Like everything, I think when you start looking at the masses compared to everybody else, Steph, as he continues to rise in the ranking, is like, it's not going to be like, oh, everybody ate on LeBron's watch. Like, no, Steph was a top 10 player of all time. He might be the greatest point guard of all time. That's who he had to go up against. And he did it pretty well for many years. You know what I mean? So like, I think that will be an interesting thing. Kevin Durant's career path will almost help or hurt LeBron depending on kind of how it finishes up. And right now it is definitely helping his case.
Yeah. It's pretty cool to see LeBron doing what he's doing this year, but it's also, just it puts into perspective, like, it's not like what LeBron's doing are not just counting stats. It's obvious that like he's affecting winning above and beyond just like putting up points, rebounds, and assists, because Durant is still putting up great numbers and he does it everywhere. But yet somehow he is not affecting winning.
Like, it's shocking.
it's almost as if you need to be more than just like you need to do more than just play basketball well to be a great basketball player. Like, you might actually have to know how to like communicate with your teammates and, I don't know, not be a weirdo. But yeah, so anyway, Western Conference playoff race is looking awesome. The other race going on in the NBA is the race for the rights to draft Cooper Flagg. We talked a little Cooper Flagg and Duke earlier, but what do you think? I mean, you think it's worth the hype? You think he's going to be, a good enough player that if you were one of these, bottom teams, you'd maybe tank a little bit trying to, wiggle your way to that pick? I mean, is it worth it?
I mean, I think the way I would put it, I don't know, I've never been big into like the tanking stuff, but you see like Victor Wembanyama. I think that's obviously a situation where you're like, yeah, we lose a few games here, try and get that pick. I don't think I'm feeling that same way for Cooper Flagg, other than I haven't heard too many names or watching the tournament, seen that many people that I'm like, I got really high hopes for that guy in the NBA. I mean, I think there's some talented players, don't get me wrong. They probably will turn into really good NBA players. But right now, there's not this hype around a bunch of guys that you're saying, like, this guy could be really good. This guy's definitely a top 5 pick. So I think because he's kind of standing out, yeah, that's kind of what you're thinking. If you got the number 1 pick, I think you absolutely have to take him. You're not building your team on, the idea of we don't want to get killed by the media later if we make the wrong decision. You're trying to make what you truly believe is the right decision. But that being said, when there are these no-brainers, it's like Caleb Williams, it's like, you got to take him. You can't not take him, and then he does blow up, and you guys are looked at as fools. You can sit there and say you like Jaden Daniels, and you think he's good. But if you take him first over Caleb and he doesn't end up being good, you're going to get crushed. The Trailblazers don't get crushed for taking Greg Oden over Kevin Durant. We talk about Greg Oden being a bust. I never hear Trailblazers even mentioned because it made sense at the time. It was the right pick. It was a no-brainer. Kevin Durant, yes, looked good, but there was some questions still of what he could be. You saw Greg Oden, you knew, you take him. And it doesn't work out, at least you're not going to get killed. So I think the number 1 team absolutely has to take him. Now, that being said, do I think he is going to be worthwhile to tank and do all that stuff? I think he will instantly be a good NBA player. I don't think there's a chance he's just like a bust. I think 10 years from now, you fast forward, he's still in the NBA and he's playing well and, he's a good player. I don't know if I see him being an all-star ever. I'm not sure. That's not, to me, I don't have it like as a lock or a guarantee that I think some people do. I think he could be, but I don't know. I think there's plenty of players who are really good in college and they don't make the NBA. And I don't think that'll be him. I think he can be a good, solid NBA player. I just don't know if I see him being like an all-star. I think the quickness level, some of the more players being athletic at his size, he's going to see that a lot more. Right now, he's probably the most athletic person at his height in 99% of the games. So, I think that'll be a little different. I thought of Aaron Gordon. I think he can play a very similar. He's not super quick, but he is athletic. Obviously, Aaron Gordon's super athletic. I think, if he goes to the Wizards, he could put up some pretty big numbers right away. Like, I think that's very doable on a pretty bad team. He could put up some big numbers, but I see him more like his future being when he gets to Denver, playing with somebody who's definitely better than him. He's no question that he's, not the number 1 guy, and he just does all the little things. He can play defense. He'll play defense. He'll get rebounds. He'll just play good off. They're not going to sit there and say ISO for Cooper Flagg, but he'll get plays. He'll be making the smart decisions and doing that stuff. And that's kind of where I see him getting to. So I think it's a no-brainer. You take him 1. I just am not thinking in my head that this is going to be like the next superstar in the NBA personally.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I see him as a big superstar or not, but like I do feel like he's an all-star. Like I think he's going to be good enough to be an all-star in the NBA.
You think consistently, like year after year, all-star?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think he does enough kind of in all facets of the game that I think he's going to be an all-star. I think he's got a chance I think he's athletic enough to match up with NBA players at his size, because I also think he's a really good defensive player too. So he doesn't just rely on the fact that he's more athletic than most of the dudes. He plays in good positioning. He rotates well. He helps well. He's a really smart player. I think he'll be potentially even all defensive team. maybe second team all defense, but like I think he's got that type of ceiling for sure. I heard, Jay Williams, obviously a big Duke homer, but like I know he was saying like, oh, Cooper, he's going to be like the face of the league. I don't know that I see it being like that. I'm pretty high on him, and I do think he's the type of player that like will probably like affect winning on whatever team drafts him. Like if the Wizards draft him, they're going to win a lot more games with him.
Yeah.
I mean, unless their coaching is terrible and the guys around him just refuse to play good team basketball. But like I think with him on your team, you're going to feel like we can kind of run the offense through him, have him facilitate. We're going to get better looks probably by the sheer fact that like he's pretty good at like getting defensive players into tough positions where they have to help and then he kicks it out or whatever.
Is he going to be playing? I mean, you think he's going to be playing a 3 in the NBA? Is he going to be playing a 4?
I think he's going to play a 4.
You think him against AD, he's going to be impacting
he matched up against AD in the Olympics. He was on the whatever their like college squad and obviously, nobody saw like every single practice, but we did get to see, some tape from those scrimmages, and he held his own against AD pretty well.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he blocked one of AD's shots. He was scoring on AD. Like I think Flagg he's kind of sneaky athletic for his size, and so I think like he will be a tough matchup for an AD because I think he'll be he's quicker.
I was going to say, I think I'm curious to see how his athleticism / quickness, how it does stack up in the NBA compared to other players. I know you can just test your vertical and be like, okay, but I think it's different playing in game. Like how quickly do you get to that peak, right? I mean, some guys are quick twitch jumpers, some are just kind of slower, So I think seeing how that fits, also seeing what he does like for strength and stuff too. Like I think that would be, he's not Wembanyama that's 7'6" and can get away with being pretty skinny, or he doesn't have quite the game that like Kevin Durant has where you can be skinny out on the perimeter. I think he's got to be maybe more like a Giannis, just getting bigger. Like I know he can shoot better than Giannis.
He probably needs to add 15, 20 pounds to like get to like, because I think he's ESPN has him listed at like 205, and he's like 6'9" and 205, and like that's a little slender. I mean, I think it's fine for now. Like I even think next year it would be fine, but I would guess like within a couple years they'd like to see him like 215, 225. I think 225 would be like a really good weight because you're going to assume it's going to be mostly muscle. I mean, he's not going to add fat. He's not Zion Williamson.
No, I think he needs to literally do the Giannis diet, whatever that was. I mean, he doesn't appear as skinny as Giannis was originally, but I could see him getting this kind of size that Giannis has, just like pure like the strength. And I think that would be big because that's almost where I personally think why he's so good in college is because he has such a good overall game, right? He can post up, he can take you off the dribble, he can shoot, he can catch and shoot, he can shoot off the dribble, he plays defense. I mean, everything, he can pass, he's a willing passer. So I think he does everything, but I don't know if he does any one thing at like a 10. Personally, I don't know. I mean, maybe finishing at the rim, you could say, or something, but like most thing, like you watch him ball handle and stuff, like you're like, oh, this guy's 6'9" and he's doing it, like that's pretty good. But if you're just like, there's a 6'3" for prime Russell Westbrook guarding him, like is he going to be able to do anything as far as his handles getting around? You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's what I'm looking at, is saying I love his game, and it would, I'd love to see him do really well in the NBA. I'm a Duke fan. I like his game. I just am looking at it saying, like, I don't see anything that's a 10. If everything's like 8.5 or 8, you're like, well, that's awesome in college. Will that translate to the NBA across the board? Or does he need to get to some spots where he's a 10? Like he could get to be a way better shooter. And then, that's going to change my perception on what he'll be. But like the current way he shoots, it's like, you can knock down some college threes when you're fairly open, but you're not really a pure shooter. You can tell. So I think that's, to me, you'd have to like upgrade in a couple of areas to get to a 10, even if it means he becomes a little worse off in another area. Like I think that would be worthwhile to get some higher peaks. But we'll see. I think there's a chance. I just am not really betting on it.
I think he should kind of take the a little bit of the Jokic approach too, as it comes to his offensive game. Because Jokic is, I mean, he's a big dude, but like, it's not really his sheer size that makes him such a good offensive player. It's just he's a pretty like crafty player. Like he knows how to get his shot against guys that are more athletic than he is, or even maybe even bigger and stronger than he is. Now he is pretty big and strong, but I think if Flagg can kind of take that approach too, of like, I don't necessarily need to be able to beat everybody. I just need to be able to figure out like, how can I get to my spot? I need to work on, if it's an elbow jumper, if that what ends up being like, this is the best shot, like this is the best shot in my arsenal. It's like figure out how to get to that spot consistently in the NBA. And if you do that, like you don't have to be the most like athletic or the best dribbler or, the most explosive. But I think he's got that kind of ability in him. I kind of see like, he could be like one of those guys that averages like in the low 20s for points per game, probably right around 10 rebounds and like 6 assists, and then give you like 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks a game.
Yeah.
Like kind of
we can figure out like how to do what Luka's done. Not that he would be Luka Doncic, like Luka's playing point guard. Just similarly to your point, he's not the fastest guy, he's not the most athletic, but he's crafty. He knows how to get to his spots. Maybe he will do that. Like I said, I don't feel like I've seen him. And again, it's a positive thing that he's a great team player. He doesn't demand having the basketball. Mm-hmm. So just to this point, I haven't seen like the Jokic, he's the main focus of the offense, the Luka where he's the main focus. Like he feels like he would slide in better as like a very talented role player to a better player. But I mean, yeah, obviously anybody can turn into anything. And I think if he's looking at some of those guys and the Jokic, some of the European players, that type of style, and still having his athleticism, I mean, he definitely has plenty of upside. I'll be curious to see how good he actually is. But I think he is a lock for the one pick. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we got one more topic to do here. And that's a little NFL talk. So we've been in free agency mode since the Eagles did their thing at the Super Bowl. And the listeners want to know, what's the best move of the offseason so far?
I was trying to find like a good, exciting one that's kind of like, bam, like pops. But I feel like most of the better moves, weren't that exciting. I think I have a feeling what you might go with. So I'm going to go with something a little different. I'm going with the Rams, Vontae Adams, I guess, if it's one particular move. I'm going to go with that. I think, yes, he's getting a little bit older, but I still think he's a very quality receiver. He's a big receiver. I think he still's got plenty of juice left in the tank. I don't think you got to see that on the Jets. I think the whole team was just a disaster at that point. I don't think it was possible for anybody to look good in that situation. Obviously, do not think Rodgers is what Matthew Stafford is. I get the Rams were kind of looking at that, but I think you're just saying at his age, we're not going to break the bank for him. And I think they made the right move by keeping him, getting him there, coming to some kind of agreement. I think that'll be huge. Next to Puka Nacua, they got Tutu Atwell back, who I think is a pretty solid third option, fast, athletic type of guy. They got him back. So I think he could be that piece that will make a big difference. And I picked them too. Part of it was saying like, who's truly going to move the needle for a team enough to make a difference? And so I look at like the way they finished last year as an Eagles guy, picked them to win the Super Bowl. I don't think the game was as close as it finished. Some things happen and I understand the ball bounces a certain way. And like the Rams had a chance to win that game against the Eagles. I get that's true, but I also thought the Eagles clearly handled them the whole game. They were in complete control and like I don't think it was as close. But either way, they only lost by 6, and no other team that the Eagles faced after that was even remotely close to them. They blew out Commanders, blew out the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So when you're looking at that, yes, it was a snowy game, it was a little unorthodox, but I just think the Rams were already going the right direction. That defense is already young and very talented. I think the offense now, you got Kieran Williams, you got Puka Nacua is established, and you bring him in there. I think they got a chance to that can kind of push them over the edge. I was thinking of like a Debo is kind of that similar thing with the Commanders. I just personally think the Commanders are going to take a step back. I think they were overrated this year. I think they had an incredible year. Don't get me wrong. I mean, everything about it was way better than anyone expected. I think Debo's getting a little bit older. I don't think he wants to be used the way that he was once used, where he was really hitting his peak. So I don't see that being as big of an upgrade as a lot of people think. And again, it's kind of about team success that I'm looking at it from. There's one other one I'll see if you bring up, but so I'm going to go with the Rams and bringing in Davante Adams. I think that's a big move.
Yeah, I like that one. That wasn't the one I was going to go with, but I do think the Rams have kind of gone under the radar as having one of the better off seasons, especially because at the start of the off season, there was talk of the Rams might be parting ways with Matthew Stafford. And I just never understood that. I was like, why would the Rams want to do that? He looks as good as he, like he doesn't look like he's slowed down at all. I think that team is really good. I'm probably higher on them than you are. I thought that, while the Eagles were the better team, I thought the Rams showed that they're the type of football team that can go out and beat a team that's better than them. And they were close to being able to do it. And, the ball, bounces a little different way in that game. And maybe they end up winning that game and they're the Super Bowl champion again.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I really like what they've done this offseason. And I do think Davante Adams is a good addition. I actually think the best move, and it's obviously multiple moves, but the Bears offensive line, I think was the best thing that, free agency move, but specifically, I actually think the center that they added. They added that center from Dahlman from the Falcons. Yeah. And, I think that position goes a little underrated at times. And the Bears have not had good center play in years, really honestly, since Olin Kreutz retired. It's been a long time since they've had actually a good center. I'm not saying he's a Pro Bowl, Hall of Famer, or anything like that, but I think he's a really solid center and a guy that you're not going to worry about him on your offensive line. Obviously, adding Joe Thuney is great. If Jonah Jackson is healthy and remains healthy, which last year he wasn't, the interior line was fixed overnight.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but I really liked that move with the center of adding Dahlman. I thought that, the guards are great, but you want to have the center is kind of the captain of the offensive line anyway. So you want that guy to be a good football player and not someone who everyone else in the offensive line is like, this dude sucks. We got to take orders from this idiot. He can't even snap the ball, So that was probably my favorite. I was not high on the Debo move for a couple of reasons. One, I agree with you. I think the Commanders are probably going to take a little step back this year. I think they overachieved last year, and I think I think it's going to be kind of like the Houston Texans, where they overachieve in year one and then they underachieve in year two, and then I think they'll kind of fall somewhere in the middle there in their third year. And I also don't think Debo's got much left in him. He hasn't looked good in a while. I think he's banged up now as he's getting older. I don't know how big of a move that really is for them. I
think for them specifically, again, it's what did you need? I kind of was trying to take everything into consider, not just DK Metcalf is the biggest name. It's how does that truly help, the Steelers and what's it going to look like? That defense is the first thing they need to fit. Going after anybody on offense just seemed unnecessary. They scored a ton of points last year. It's that defense was awful. So to me, it was to get him and not focus more on the defense. I was that just kind of brought you down. So I just jotted them as one that I figure some people will think is a huge move. And I'm no, I think the opposite. But I wrote the Bears down first, and I figured that you'd probably use that one. So that's why I was trying to think of another one with the Rams. But yeah, they led the league. Caleb Williams got sacked 68 times last year, is the most in the league. So clearly that was the spot they needed to fix. They fixed it instantly with some big names, some good players, and got that done. And also, again, how that kind of shapes up in the conference. Detroit, we all think is going to be not what they were purely from the head coaching standpoint. Some players changing, but looks like they'd probably take a step back. The Vikings, no one's acting like Sam Darnold is the best quarterback. Most people actually think the opposite. He's not very good, but still, you're getting rid of what you just had, and you're bringing in a rookie to do that. He could be way better than him, but I think with that change, they probably step back a little bit. And then the Packers, I mean, they've had a couple good seasons, but I don't think they're, they don't look much better than they did this past year, I wouldn't say. So feels like with the Bears addressing exactly what they needed, that should be able to propel them in the division as well. Again, obviously the Commanders has got to deal with the Eagles, who I think are going to be just as good. So that was kind of, I thought the Bears, that was obviously some really good moves that they made on their end too.
Yeah, and then obviously they got the coach right, I think, and
yeah,
not only the head coach, but I mean, just seeing what he's done with the coaching staff has been really impressive in my mind. Because he brought over the offensive line coach from Detroit with him, so he was able to pull him with. He, Antoine Randall, who I don't know if you remember, but like
Steelers, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was on the Steelers, and then he, in college, played at Indiana. And I remember going to an Illinois football game at Indiana when Antoine Randall was their quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being like, oh, this dude's like pretty crazy, like super athletic. And then he ended up being a wide receiver, but like he's the I think he's the wide receiver coach.
Oh, is he?
But he's also like the offensive assistant. And I think players seem to really like him. Like I think he was pretty well respected in his last job. And then the defensive coordinator, that was the one I was really happy about, Dennis Allen.
Dennis Allen, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's like a Kansas City Steve Spagnuolo type hire where Dennis Allen's not getting another head coaching job. Like he just is. No one's going to give him that opportunity. Both instances of him being a head coach with the Raiders and the Saints have been disastrous. He's like the losingest coach of all time with more than like 30 games coached or something like that, or 50 games coached. So he's just not getting another opportunity. So you don't have to worry about losing him. And that was kind of what we had talked about before was, you got to make sure you get the head coach hire right, because if you hire a really good defensive coach and he's not great, but he's good, then you're going to have a constant revolving door on your offensive coordinator and your team's just going to be in flux. That's what the Bears normally are. So if you get the right guy and he's got the offensive side, taken care of, it does make things simpler building out the rest of your coaching staff and kind of projecting like forward, how do we remain a really talented team and well coached team. So
yeah, absolutely.
Bears did well, I think, this year. Now I thought last year they did well, and in the offseason, and they performed horribly. So we will see, but I do feel like they actually addressed the real issues this year, whereas last year they thought they could just plug Caleb Williams in and like, oh, he'll fix everything.
Yeah.
And it's like he's a really good football player, and I still believe that he's a potential MVP caliber quarterback. But he can't just fix everything overnight as a rookie. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one guy hasn't signed anywhere yet though, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And I've got an idea of where I think he should go and possibly could go, but I want to know what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on where he's going to end up signing?
Well, I mean, it seems like the Steelers is maybe one of the only places that he truly could end up. It sounds like maybe you got a different idea of something, but and anything's possible technically, but that sounds to be the place. I was going to say just what I think, but now, like what I think he should do, now I think it actually could happen. I think he should just retire. I mean, we just talked about, the Kevin Durant stuff, and it's like at some point it is possible to hurt your legacy. You just can go to a really bad team at the end of your career and, you don't do well and you retire, and that's fine. But I think to, go places and be the, literally set the whole organization on fire and you're the reason for it, essentially, or at least that's what everybody believes, that's pretty bad. Then you start stacking up to Zach Wilson, and it's like, well, they did better with him there. And it's like you start running into these things. If you go do it again somewhere else, I mean, it's got to take at least a little bit of a hit. I'm not saying it removes everything you've accomplished, but it does start to take a bit of a hit there. And I just think with the Steelers, I was as high as anybody on them last year. But even I don't think adding Aaron Rodgers versus Fields or, Wilson is going to make them contenders. So then you're just
I was just going to ask about that. Like,
Yeah, well, what are
They
you really
made the
coming back
playoffs
for?
last year and got smashed by the Ravens. Like, would they have been any better off if they had Aaron Rodgers instead of Russell Wilson last year? I don't think so.
No, I think maybe Aaron Rodgers is slightly better as far as like his physical capabilities, but I also think everything else he brings is way worse, and therefore, it offsets pretty. I mean, I think it really does have an impact. So yeah, it's like if you don't realistically think there's a chance of that upside potential, then what is it? Because if it's just a paycheck, I feel like you could get a paycheck and doing a lot of different things that you don't have to go play football. It doesn't appear like you're overly passionate, like one of those just guys like die hard, can't stop playing. Maybe, but it doesn't seem like it. So what, you're going to go to the Steelers where you're going to have probably the least amount of control you've ever had in your life, or you're going to try and get the control you want and then you're going to mess everything up, right? I mean, Tomlin's not just going to let him come in and do what he does. Like it's just not going to happen. So you're going to be like as restricted as you've ever been. Most people, I mean, I get you're ultra competitive. You think you have a chance to always win, but like 99% of people aren't going to think you have a realistic chance of winning. You're going to have to deal with Pickens and DK Metcalf, who I think are incredibly talented for a receiving core, but we know receivers are kind of the divas, but that's about as bad as a room might get. I mean, Pickens is out of his mind. I mean, he's almost like Antonio Brown at this point, and Metcalf has been known to have some serious flare-ups with that. So it's like that issues that you're going to be dealing with. And then the last thing is, again, just as far as impacting the legacy, Tomlin's got 18 seasons in a row of never having a losing season. If he comes in and somehow messes that up, again, you can't say that doesn't impact the legacy. Like, you guys just had a winning season, you made it to the playoffs, and you swap old Russell Wilson for Aaron Rodgers and you go backward. Like, with some enhancements, it appears. I get they lost Najee Harris, but I don't think anybody really cared, a whole lot about that. It's going to be like, that one's going to have to hurt a little bit. There's no way for, if that were to happen, to do it. So I just don't really see any upside to doing it. I think it would be not fun for him just as far as the situations he likes. I think there's potential chance to ruin some legacy. I just think he should retire, and best case for him, since he still appears to want to play, maybe someone gets hurt mid-season and then you're able to fill in. Kind of one of those old guys fills in, just tries to keep the train rolling a little bit if someone gets hurt. No guarantee that'll happen or that anyone will want him, but I just think that would be kind of your best play. It's like, all right, call it a career. If somebody calls an ass mid-season, I stay in shape for 6 months into the year, that would be your spot. But yeah, I think he should retire, and I do think the Steelers might try and get a quarterback in the draft or do something that'll turn Aaron Rodgers off to it, and I think there is now a decent chance he actually will retire.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the betting odds are that he goes to Pittsburgh. I agree with you completely. I don't think it's a good idea for either side for that to happen. I don't see what the upside is for the Steelers. Like, I don't know why they are really entertaining this. Like you could just bring Russell Wilson back. Like, for probably less money than Aaron Rodgers is going to ask for, because what's Russell Wilson's market right now? I mean, I don't know if no one's going to sign him as a starter.
He hasn't gotten signed still? He's still a free agent?
I believe so, right? I mean,
it probably is right. I was just trying to think in my head. Fields went to the Jets. Yeah, maybe no one had.
Fields got a job quicker than Russell Wilson.
I mean, I think that's smart personally, but I just think it's like a lot of people have said, what team is like an older quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl? There's none. So it's like, yeah, I'd rather go with Fields and take a chance. I mean, you're not signing the big money. You might as well see what you can do there.
Yeah, I mean, so what I personally think, right? So I guess he'll go to Pittsburgh, right? Because that's probably what he's going to end up doing, is what it looks like. But I think that maybe there's a chance that's not actually going to happen. And he's either going to retire, like you said, or there's one team out there that I think actually could potentially be, at least kind of sneaky if they added him, and that's the 49ers. And I heard Colin actually say it on his show this morning, that he thinks that Aaron has been talking to the 49ers like kind of behind closed doors, because the rumors are that Purdy was going to take a relatively team-friendly deal but wanted to lock in a contract extension. But I guess he asked for Dak's contract amount. And that's a lot of money, and I don't think Brock Purdy's worth it. And I actually think there's a good opportunity there, because if I'm the 49ers, right, I think that like if you plugged Aaron Rodgers in instead of Brock Purdy, you probably have a similar football team in terms of talent at the quarterback position and on offense. And you don't have to pay him $50-60 million a year and lock into that forever. You could probably get him at a relatively discount. It's a good fit for Aaron because he gets to go to an offensive guru in Kyle Shanahan and an offense that's going to be, that team's going to be built around the offense. I mean, I don't know.
That seems like your thought then with Purdy. So they sign Rodgers, they trade Purdy, or they bench him for the whole year as all right, let's see what Rodgers does, and this is you're going to take a whole year off to determine if you get paid?
I think they'd trade him. Okay, would be my guess.
Restart.
Obviously, I think they would sign Rodgers, but they'd probably be like, we're trading Purdy. So we'll sign Rodgers, and then we will literally turn around and trade Brock Purdy. Now, I don't know what you get for Brock Purdy, but that's kind of the question, right? Is if you're the 49ers and you're trying to decide, would this even be worth it? If you don't think you're going to get a lot in return for Brock Purdy, then you probably don't have the quarterback, right? I mean, like right now, the Chicago Bears, I guarantee, would get more for Caleb Williams than the 49ers would get for Brock Purdy, and it wouldn't be close.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And Brock Purdy is more accomplished in the NFL.
True.
And he has actually done it. He's been to the Super Bowl. He actually played reasonably well in that Super Bowl, didn't play horribly.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get even close to the type of haul you're going to get you would get for Caleb Williams, who just had a 5-11 season or 5-12 season. So my point is that like, why would you want to lock yourself into a quarterback that you know is probably not good enough to get you to the Super Bowl and to win it without everything else being perfect, which is hard to do when you pay your quarterback $60 million.
I think the only problem with that is I do think you're running a pretty big risk, and not necessarily like, I don't personally think that Purdy is some incredible quarterback by any means, but you bring Rodgers in, and Rodgers is as bad as he has appeared, and the team does suck. Now you're kind of sitting there not only looking a little bit like idiots because you let Purdy walk, but now you have to sit there and say, okay, well, clearly it isn't just anybody can come in here. Like, there's got to at least be some level of competency.
Jimmy Garoppolo looked pretty good.
Well, he did, but then this is my thought is now, like, it's kind of the recent history. So now you're saying, okay, well, we had Purdy. Apparently he was better than we thought because we just brought in Aaron Rodgers and he sucked. Our team sucked. So he didn't work. And then the last guy we tried before that didn't work, which was, what's his name that they drafted? Trey
Lance.
Yeah, Trey Lance. So yes, Garoppolo before that did and Purdy did. But like, now you got kind of two of the last three that have been here didn't look good. You start second guess. And now let's just say it is true. Maybe Garoppolo was a little bit better than we thought. He did have some injuries that really kind of derailed him at the end. Maybe Purdy is a little bit better than we all think. And now you got to go try and find a quarterback in the draft. And you've struck out, like I said, on two of your last three. One that was drafted in Trey Lance and one that was traded for. But now you've missed on two out of the three. And you really got lucky with Purdy because, it was it wasn't like really part of your drafting scheme was like, oh, we're going to nail this guy in the last pick. So you're kind of like, we kind of got lucky on that one. And the other two that we tried, we sucked on. Like, now you really got to be rethinking your whole process a bit and being like, who are we going to draft? Because maybe it does actually. I don't know. I just think you'd run that risk because Aaron Rodgers is a risk. I don't think it is a lock that he does. I think it's possible. I could absolutely see him coming in and them actually being just as good, if not better. Very possible. But it could go the other way. And I just think if it goes the other way, you might be like totally shit in the bed with everything. If it goes well, sure, I think it's a great move, and I think your team is moving in the right direction. A lot of things are opportunities ahead, but if it messes up, I just feel like it'd go really bad.
I mean, there's a chance it could go bad, but I just look back to Kyle Shanahan figured out how to make Jimmy Garoppolo look pretty good. And I know the Trey Lance thing didn't really work out, but also he got hurt right away. He broke his ankle. And then other quarterbacks were playing in front of him. So I wonder if there was if he had never had that injury, what would somebody like Kyle Shanahan been able to coach out of him? he ended up going to Dallas and being the backup. Like, he's not getting, the type of reps, the type of attention he needs to develop probably. So, like, I don't know that I would worry about that too much. And then I also think, like, from Kyle Shanahan and their general manager, John Lynch, from their perspectives, right? Both of those dudes, if they got fired because it didn't work out, they're getting another job. John Lynch has done a good job with that roster in San Francisco. I mean, he built a fantastic roster. If San Francisco says, this was too risky of a move and it backfired, so you guys are gone, I'm guessing John Lynch gets a good job somewhere else. And
That's
Kyle
true.
Shanahan, people think that he's maybe the best coach in football, just, doesn't have a quarterback.
No,
so,
that's totally
fair. I think it's a worthwhile move for those guys to do. I know it's risky, but I also think it's risky to give Brock Purdy a 4-year, $200 million contract.
Well, that I 100% agree with. I don't know if that's the move. I mean, I think you got to.
And if you're not going to do that, you don't have a quarterback. So why not try Aaron Rodgers? If anybody can make him work, it's going to be Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's back home, so I mean, I'm sure that's definitely would be a spot he'd want to go to.
I would think San Francisco would be a place that, like, he would probably do pretty well in, because he, I know he's pretty, like, kind of on the far conservative end, and San Francisco isn't, but, like, it's going to be a little bit more of his vibes, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think New York City was ever, like, a good fit for him.
One thing I will say on that, not that it wouldn't work or whatever, but maybe the Shanahan thing, maybe the key component to it is really taking a player that isn't that talented. And that's the quarterback that works. Like, Brock Purdy was the last pick. I don't know what Garoppolo was, but he played at Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, he was like a second or third round pick from the pick.
Like, he started gaining some speed, but when you go to Eastern Illinois, you know what I mean? Like, you aren't Mr. Quarterback that everyone's looking at into the draft. I think those guys are obviously very humble. They don't have, like, their own agendas of the talent they think they have and what they're capable. Like, I don't know if Caleb Williams goes there and is good. The guy is very talented. He's capable of doing more. I think Shanahan's system is so solid, and so it's like you got to follow it to a T. And I think these guys who are, not highly sought after to start, they're willing to do it. Like, yeah, bring me in here. Like, I trust, like, and just do exactly what he says. You get your Trey Lances that think like, hey, I'm, the next Cam Newton. I'm this and that. And it's like, no, dude, follow this. Again, he had some injuries, and, like, I get it. But, I wonder, that'd be the other potential scary thing with Aaron Rodgers. Like, the dude obviously thinks doesn't think. I mean, hopefully he would come in and be willing to follow the process and listen. But let's just say that he goes there and it doesn't work. That would be my advice to them, is like, maybe look for that low end pick that's just going to follow your system and do it. That's maybe what they need to make it work.
Well, I'm not sure I'd be, like, thrilled about that move if I were a 49ers fan, but I think that if I was a 49ers fan, you told me that I have two options. One option is we sign Brock Purdy to basically the same contract that Dak Prescott signed with the Cowboys, or we trade Brock Purdy for an unknown amount of assets. We don't really know what he'll bring back, but we're going to trade him so he won't be on the team, and we're going to sign Aaron Rodgers up for a year or two. I'd probably take that option over the Dak contract with Brock Purdy, because, you look at the Cowboys. How are they going to become competitive with that contract? I don't see a way forward for them. They've got a general manager / owner problem that's maybe their biggest issue, but you can't pay a subpar quarterback A-level money. You're not going to win football games.
I've always been not understanding of that. And some of it just takes time to see. Like, I think I've talked to you about it before, but, like, not taking running backs, in the first picks, or it's like, if this guy is, and I know you don't ever know anything, but you think this guy is Saquon Barkley, it's like, why wouldn't you take him with the first pick? And it was like, well, there's so many, and they're, it was like, I can understand what people are saying, but I still look as, like, when you have that opportunity to get that player, like, what does it matter? Like, you want to take him right away and get the guy and lock him in. It's kind of the same logic, but opposite with, like, these quarterbacks. I don't understand quarterbacks being due for their thing and just thinking we get top of the market. Like, I understand you're a start, but you're not the best. You're just not. I don't know what else to say. You're not the best quarterback. If you're Trevor Lawrence, if you're Tua Tagovailoa, like all these guys getting these deals, like you aren't the best quarterback. Like why would you reset the market? You should be like, oh, you're the 17th best quarterback. Like, it doesn't matter what's gone up in here. You could do a percentage of the cap if that's reasonable. Like, well, the highest paid, Patrick Mahomes is 20%. You're going to be at 15% of the cap. And whatever that new cap number is, I guess, fine. But to sit there and just keep redoing the market with these guys, like the next receiver shouldn't get it. If you think Jamar Chase is better than Justin Jefferson, sure, then I get why he would reset the market. If you think Jefferson is better than him, I get if you're kind of like 1A, 1B, like fine, you just make it happen. But these quarterbacks are not even in the same breath as like the top 5 quarterbacks. I don't understand that's a conversation. It's like and then you just get the random Baker Mayfield deals. It's like that's what should be then the conversation for all of these guys that we just met. Like those guys should be getting like that Baker Mayfield. Here's 30 million, here's 35. Like we want you as our starting quarterback. We want to lock you in for a good period of time, 3-4 years. But you are not making more money than every player in the whole. Like we're not doing it. And it's just crazy that that's become like a trend. I don't get the logic at all.
Yeah. And Baker is a prime example of like, if you get a good quarterback on a really good deal, and he's making a lot of money, like he's making 35 million or whatever it is. Like, it's not like he's making, what Brock Purdy's been making, which is like 800,000 as an NFL quarterback, which is pretty small. But like you're making really good money still. And like, they love him there. And they're happy with the fact that he's bringing them to the playoffs. They're winning a game, or being competitive every year in the playoffs. Like, and I would not be totally surprised if Tampa figures out in a year or two to make the right roster moves, and maybe all of a sudden they're in a Super Bowl. Like,
because the rest of the team is perfect. If they make a few other moves, I think Baker could bring them to the Super Bowl. Like he's capable, I think.
Yeah, which is what the 49ers have if they don't just lock themselves into a terrible quarterback deal that I would guess Kyle Shanahan won't see the end of. That would be my assumption, is that they signed Brock Purdy to a Dak level deal. Kyle Shanahan is not his coach at the end of that deal. Probably because they're just probably not going to win enough football games. Well, anyway,
be interesting.
That's our cap. That's our recap on the NFL free agency and all things sports this week. We'll be back next week again, so tune in. We'll have some more information on March Madness and there's another golf tournament this weekend, so I guess we might have to tune into that, let you know how that goes. So peace out, everybody.
See you.